used to love staying at the office until late at night. I liked the silence. The phones would go quiet. The doors of the meeting rooms would close. Even the smell of coffee people had left behind during the day would slowly fade away. All that remained was the sound of my keyboard, the hum of the ventilation, and the occasional flickering of motion sensor lights. Back then, I thought it was something peaceful. Now, whenever that silence comes to mind, my stomach tightens. I worked as an analyst at a small but fast-growing tech company in North Austin. Our company occupied 3 floors of a 12-story office building. My team was on the 7th floor. During the day, the building was quite lively. People grabbed coffee in the lobby. Brief conversations happened in front of the elevators, and voices constantly rose from the meeting rooms. But after midnight, the building turned into a very different place. The security guard usually stayed in the lobby. He rarely came up to the upper floors. The elevators kept running, but most of the floors would be dark. When you stepped into the hallway, the lights would turn on one by one, then go out again a few minutes later. Even watching those lights go out one by one left a strange feeling inside you. That year was budget season, and I needed to work late almost every night. Sometimes it was 11, sometimes midnight, sometimes even later. At first I didn't mind. I even thought I focused better when I was alone. Then Kyle started staying late too. Kyle was a data engineer. We weren't on the same team, but our projects frequently overlapped. When I first met him, he seemed quite normal. He was quiet. Very quiet. But not in the way you know, like not the kind who seems like they're not even in the room. Quite the opposite. When he sat somewhere, everyone knew he was there. He didn't talk much. He didn't make unnecessary jokes. In meetings, he only spoke when needed. But when he did speak, everyone listened, because he really knew his job. He was always quite kind to me, too. At first, I took that as a good thing. But there was something about Kyle's kindness that I couldn't quite put into words. You know people who listen to you, the ones who really listen, not the ones who are just waiting to respond. Kyle listened like that too, but there was something different about him. It felt like he wasn't trying to understand what I was saying. It felt like he was recording them somewhere. At the time, that thought would have seemed absurd to me. Now, when I think of him, it's the first thing that comes to mind. For the first few months, everything between us was completely normal. We talked a few times by the coffee machine. We ended up at the same table for lunch. We had brief conversations at team meetings. It was the kind of ordinary relationship you'd call office acquaintances. Then one Thursday night, it was almost 11:30. I thought I was alone on the 7th floor. The hallway lights had long since gone out. Only the section with my desk was lit. At that moment, the office door opened. I looked up. Kyle walked in. His hair was disheveled. There were dark circles under his eyes. He had a laptop bag in his hand. "I didn't realize," he said. "Are you still here?" I smiled. "Budget close," I said. He gave a small laugh, too. "Me too," he said. Then he moved to his own desk and opened his laptop. That night we worked in the same room for nearly 2 hours. We talked very little. Only the sound of keyboards could be heard in between. It wasn't strange. At least it didn't feel strange in that moment. In fact, if I'm being honest, knowing I wasn't alone in the building had felt kind of good. When we left, we rode the elevator together. We said hello to the security guard in the lobby. Outside, we said a quick see you and parted ways. The next night he came again. And the night after that. On the fourth night, I noticed this. It was around 11:45 p.m. Kyle closed his laptop, packed his bag, and turned to me. "When are you heading out?" he asked. There was nothing wrong with the question. Still, I felt a brief, sharp discomfort inside me. "I'll probably leave in half an hour," I said. "I'll wait for you," he said. "It's not good to go down alone at this hour." I thanked him. I laughed. Because in that moment, I didn't know what else to do. We went down together. Everything seemed normal again. But that night, when I got home and lay down in bed, something stuck in my mind. Kyle had never been in the office before me. He'd always arrived after I stayed late. And he had always gotten ready to leave right when I was about to leave. I tried to push that thought out of my head right away. Because there are some things you don't want to ask yourself. Asking means accepting one of two possibilities. Either you're paranoid, or something is genuinely wrong. That night, I didn't want to accept either. So I slept. For a few weeks, everything continued in small increments. Kyle was still kind at the office, still distant, still good at his job. But I'd started to notice him. Once you notice something, it's very hard to ignore it. In meetings, he always sat across from me. I know that sounds ridiculous. In a meeting room, people sitting across from each other is normal. But one day I tested it. I arrived at the meeting early and moved to a completely different spot from where I usually sat, to the corner. Kyle came in a few minutes later. He paused for a moment at the door. He scanned the room. Then he came and sat directly across from me. He said nothing. Neither did I. Because what was I going to say? "Why are you looking at me? Why do you always sit across from me?" These sounded ridiculous when said out loud. They didn't feel like evidence, they just felt like an unsettling sensation. And unsettling feelings most of the time aren't enough for anyone. Then the social media part started. Kyle first sent a connection request on LinkedIn. I accepted. We worked at the same company. There was nothing strange about it. A few days later, he followed me on Instagram. I accepted that too. At first, I didn't think much of it. Then I noticed he was liking everything I posted. Again, on its own, there's nothing strange about that. People like posts. But Kyle's likes came almost instantly. I'd post something at 6 in the morning, and he'd like it within a few minutes. I'd post at 11 at night, and he'd like it again. For a while, I thought it was coincidence. Maybe he was online a lot. Maybe his notifications were on. Maybe I was exaggerating. Then I deliberately tested it. One night at 1:30 a.m., I posted an ordinary photo that I thought no one would see. It wasn't anything special or attention-grabbing, just a coffee mug on my desk. 6 minutes later, a notification came. Kyle had liked it. 1:36 a.m. I held my phone and stared at the screen. For a long time, I did nothing. At that moment, for the first time, this sentence passed through my mind. Maybe he wasn't seeing my posts. Maybe he was waiting. The next day at the office, he acted like nothing had happened. He said good morning. He took notes in the meeting. He helped me with a chart. Everything was normal. And that was the worst part, because a person expects an open threat, Someone who yells, who makes it obvious they're following you, who clearly crosses boundaries. Then it's easy to respond. But Kyle wasn't like that. Kyle did everything just inside the line of what could be explained away. One night, it was approaching 1 a.m. I was working alone on the 7th floor. Or at least I thought I was. I got up to go to the restroom. When I stepped into the hallway, the motion sensor lights turned on one by one. One light, then the next, then the light at the end of the hallway. At that moment, I saw the stairwell door leading to the 8th floor slowly closing. The door didn't slam shut. It didn't bang. It closed slowly, the way someone lets it go behind them. I stood where I was. The building was silent. I heard nothing but the hum of the ventilation. The 8th floor was almost completely empty at the time. The company there was in the middle of relocating and no one was supposed to be there at night. Of course, it could have been a cleaning staff member. It could have been the security guard, another employee, or even the door might have closed on its own. I told myself all of those things. Still, I walked toward the stairwell door. I stood in front of the door. I listened. There was no sound. No footsteps came from the stairwell. No voices came from above. Just silence. That night, I gave up on going to the restroom. I went back to my desk, closed my laptop, and left. When I got down to the parking garage, I didn't go straight to my car. First, I looked around it. I looked through the windows. I checked the back seat. I made sure the trunk was closed. These were things I didn't normally do. When I got home, I felt stupid. Maybe I really was overreacting. Then I opened Instagram. Kyle had posted a photo that night at 12:58 a.m. A coffee cup, a dark desk. The background was blurry, but black metal chairs were visible. There were no chairs like that on the 7th floor. The meeting rooms on the 8th floor had them. I stared at the photo for a long time, so long that the screen went dark. I turned the phone back on and looked again. I kept trying to come up with explanations for myself. Maybe it was an old photo. Maybe it had been taken on a different floor. Maybe there was a completely logical, work-related reason for him to be on the 8th floor. But something inside me no longer accepted those explanations. The next morning I called HR. When I explained, I tried especially hard to stay calm. I didn't want to seem emotional. I laid it out chronologically. The late nights, the social media likes, sitting across from me in meetings, the stairwell door, the 8th floor photo. The woman listening to me was quiet for a moment. Then she said only this. "Could you also send this in writing?" I sent it. 2 days later, they told me that Kyle had been spoken to. The only explanation I was given was this. The necessary meeting was held. Kyle stayed at the company, so did I. But I no longer stayed late. Neither did Kyle. I don't know if that was a coincidence. For a while, everything seemed to have settled down. Kyle talked to me less. He sat in different spots in meetings. He had stopped liking my posts on social media. That should have been reassuring. But it wasn't, because him stopping meant he knew he'd been doing it. A few weeks later, my ex-boyfriend called me. He lived in another city and we hadn't talked in a long time. I immediately noticed the tension in his voice. "I'm going to ask you something strange," he said. "Do you know someone named Kyle?" Something cold settled in my stomach at that moment. Why? I asked. He called me. He said he was from your circle. He asked about you. I couldn't speak for a moment. My ex-boyfriend continued. He knew where you worked, but he asked where you lived. He asked if you were still living alone. He asked when you had moved. I got uncomfortable too. Who is this guy? I couldn't answer him because I genuinely didn't know. I had worked in the same building as Kyle. I had been in the same meetings. I had ridden the same elevator. I'd talked to him by the coffee machine. But I couldn't answer that question. Who was this man? How had he found my ex-boyfriend? They had no mutual friends, no LinkedIn connections. I had never tagged him anywhere. And yet, he had found him, and he had asked about me, where I lived, whether I was alone. That night I checked my door twice. Then the windows, then the door again. A few months later I left the company. I said I had received another job offer. That wasn't a lie. But it wasn't the whole truth either. I still remember the night I decided to leave very clearly. I had stayed late again. This time it was truly the last time. I had gathered my things from my desk. Before leaving the building, I walked to the elevator area. It was 11:50 p.m. The 7th floor was dark and silent. I pressed the elevator button. I saw my own reflection in the shiny metal surface of the doors. Then the security monitor showing the far corner of the lobby caught my eye behind my reflection. Kyle was there. He was sitting in the lobby. His laptop was in front of him, but his hands weren't on the keyboard. There was no reason for him to be on that floor at that hour for any work-related purpose, and there was no reason for him to be there at all. The elevator arrived. The doors opened. For a moment I hesitated about whether to get in. Then I stepped inside and turned around. As the doors closed, I looked at the monitor again. Kyle was no longer looking at the laptop. He had lifted his head. Not at the camera, and he was looking in the direction of the elevators, as if he knew where I was. As if he was waiting for the doors to close, and just before the doors came together, I saw him. He was smiling. I still can't forget that smile. Sometimes people ask me whether Kyle was truly dangerous. I can't answer that. Maybe he was just strange. Maybe he was lonely. Maybe he was someone who didn't understand boundaries. Maybe I blew it all up in my head. Maybe the stairwell door closed from the wind. Maybe the photo from the 8th floor was old. Maybe there was an explainable way he had found my ex-boyfriend. Maybe. But there are some things I know now. I know how much a person can learn from digital traces. I know how easy it is to observe someone from a distance. I know that someone working in the same building can learn your routine, your schedule, your friends, whether you live alone, all without you noticing. And the worst part, I know how someone can make you feel utterly helpless by doing everything just inside the line of what can be explained away. Today, whenever I enter a new building, I check the exits. When I go down to the parking garage, I still walk around my car. I still look at notifications that come in late at night. When elevator doors close, I still check my reflection behind me. Because I never found out what Kyle wanted from me. But I know he was there that last night. I know he saw me. And I know he was smiling.